Okay, so now it's time for one of my favorite parts of the day. First of all, thank you all for coming. This has just been a fantastic day. Scott has this wonderful habit of taking notes during all the sessions and throwing back some sound bites.
I'm gonna make this quick, but first of all, is John Jaquette still in the room? There you go. I just want a quick shout out. For those of you that don't know John Jaquette, previous leader of entrepreneurship at Cornell, the program. I just want to say that as a freshman at Cornell, I wandered into John's office in the Warren building of
It was in the
AdQuad,
basement.
in the basement. And I kind of came in and was like, I think I want to be an entrepreneur. And I don't know how often that happened, but every person that came in, you treated as someone with hope and potential. And it's just so amazing, John, to have you here. And remember, this conference kind of was initially like, something in your mind's eye, and to see this all unfold. And then, of course, Zach and team have brought it to another level. It's just amazing. So just a quick round of applause. I mean, John, have you here. Yes. I mean, Zach, our fearless leader, I mean, what you have done for the number of entrepreneurs and PhDs and masters and friends of Cornell and everyone else as this like center of gravity of entrepreneurship at Cornell. Zach, we learned probably wants to actually work in a hummus company today as opposed to report to every dean in the college, but I'm glad you bear the brunt of it all because it's amazing. So a hand of applause for you and also to Deborah and the whole team who puts this on.
Wherever they are.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, rapid succession. Things that I'm taking away from today that I thought are worth sharing with you really, really quickly, and obviously jotting down notes super quickly as all of this was going on. But starting with, Chris in the morning, this notion of creativity being kind of curiosity combined with initiative, I thought was a really great point. He was someone who just had this interest and saw the farmer's market and was like, I'm going to start selling hummus. But I think that's such an interesting thing, like whatever we're curious about, combining that with initiative as being like the seeds of entrepreneurship, I thought was an awesome point. Creative financing as being part of the hustle. If you owe money to a vendor in the early days, just be sure to keep talking to them. That was a cool takeaway. Relationships build credit, perhaps, literally. I don't know. Getting partners to invest unlocks long-term incentives. I thought that was a really interesting point. A lot of folks sometimes ask me, should I have a strategic investor or not? Is it a bad idea to have someone else who's sort of a vendor or a partner in the space? And, some actual VCs are like, never do that. That just takes a potential acquirer off the table. There's a risk being associated. But in many cases, this is like the strategic capital is the start of a conversation that could lead to an acquisition. In Chris's case, and in Javid's case. But it's just, it's something that I think is interesting to think about when you have your vendors invested in your long-term potential. It aligns you in a marvelous way. Long-term patience being a theme of entrepreneurship, my goodness. Like I think everyone sort of talked about this to some degree. And this notion that everyone talks about what makes a great team and what makes a great product and how does a company succeed. Maybe the dirty little secret is that sticking together long enough to figure it out is the competitive advantage. And I feel like that was a theme of a number of folks who talked about their history today. Trends over fads. I'm going to remind myself of that as I look at what's going on in the market. And when you really know your category, being able to amp up the volume of your own intuition as opposed to always relying on research and data. I think whether it's hummus or whether it's building for construction workers, or building for parents, or building, in the activist area, a firm, when everyone's saying, it should be done one way and Lauren's doing it another, I think was another theme I took away. Learning hustle as a form of muscle that you would then use throughout your career as an entrepreneur. Many folks talked about that. And I love the parallels with folks that worked. I mean, two of the people that we heard from today worked at student agencies on campus selling ads door to door. And then they went on to build successful businesses. That can't be a mistake. So in some ways, hustle being a muscle, I like that. I have
to interject. So my son, I didn't expect all the student agencies call outs today. So my son's a sophomore at Cornell. Last year, he ran Big Red Shipping and Storage at student agencies. It's like a $500,000 business. Made really good buck. I was like delighted because he never asked me for money. And I hope that carries through. But it's just an incredible group of people And John's on that board too, which is fantastic. So,
Well, I
anyway,
mean, if
no
you're doing
agencies.
if you're doing manual work and feeling the sweat, like you're
Yeah.
building some muscle, you'll probably use more than you maybe realize.
Yeah.
I loved Marissa's point about throwing the backpack over the fence. I remember, Erica, when you were starting your business, just like announcing it, getting something up and running, suddenly there's this amazing dose of accountability and people reaching out to you, connecting you to people. There's something karmic that you tap when you put out your shingle and say, like, I am building this. And I just think that's a theme that I took away. Great sales. Sales is sometimes a dirty word. Like, people don't like to talk about sales, yet of course it's all about sales. It was fascinating as an MBA, like they didn't have a single class about sales. And yet at the end of the day, it's kind of all that matters in business. So what is sales? We heard some folks talk about empathy, really knowing what the customer's pain point is. I also love this notion of sales as the act of transferring energy. When you are selling your product, when you're selling your vision, whether it's to an investor in your fund or a vendor or that you're partnering with, or someone in your farmer's market buying hummus, or a parent, like transferring your enthusiasm and energy, and maybe is like the best definition of sales that I know, and it's just something for us to keep in mind. Another theme for a lot of us that are earlier in our careers these days was this notion of knowledge arbitrage that we pulled out from a couple of the discussions. I hear a lot of concern these days about AI getting in the way of entry-level roles in companies, and this question of what are young people going to do, or people earlier on in their field, what are they going to do? Well, a lot of us are actually closer to the metal on the new things that are happening in our space than those that are hiring us. And so this idea of knowledge arbitrage, the same thing happened, by the way, in the early days of social media. I remember in like the late 90s or early 2000s and mid 2000s, when social media, everyone was trying to figure out what this Twitter thing was, what Facebook was. And the very young people who knew this natively could go into big companies like GE or others and get paid a fortune just to teach them what was obvious to them. And so those of you that are native with ChatGPT, that know how to use LLMs, that know how to ask questions, know how to prompt, trust me, a lot of corporate America does not. And so you should use that knowledge arbitrage to your advantage. Javed also talked about you can't A/B test your way to something great. I truly believe this, and I've seen so many examples of companies that become incremental. They like sort of keep climbing the mountain they're on and incrementally get higher without realizing that they're climbing like the wrong mountain altogether. And so having some way, shape, or form of channeling intuition to essentially be willing to bet the company at times, that is sort of the founder mode, the elusive founder mode that a lot of people talk about that is missing in companies. But all of you were at the Entrepreneurship Conference. I mean, we should not be A/B testing our way to something great. Don't worry, nobody knows what the hell they're doing. I wrote that down. Few. Working harder and faster, is clearly a competitive advantage. I love the cultural nuances. I think the test of a great cultural set of principles is when you look at it and say that couldn't be every company. That could only be our company. And so Javed's cultural principle, no bullshit, no assholes, everybody codes, that probably would not be Procter & Gamble, or IBM, or whatever the case might be. And I love that. I think building a set of principles that are unique to our culture, is what sets us apart. And if you have principles that could be any company, you probably have the wrong set of principles. We talked a lot about co-founders, the love and respect, being able to fight. I loved the ART, the acronym of admire, respect, and trust. And it is a marriage, right, of another kind. And so us being very thoughtful on how we choose those people is absolutely crucial. For some reason, I wrote down sharp olive branch. I guess we all know what that means because I kind of forget.
That was Lauren.
Yeah, it was Lauren.
Yeah.
A sharp olive branch.
Yeah.
Maybe olive branch, but it's sharp on the other side.
Josh describing Lauren's approach.
That's right.
Olive branch with a sharp edge.
A sharp edge in the other.
Yeah.
I like that. Maybe sharp olive branches. It seems of the moment. I don't know. And then I guess I would end. There are a lot of talks about capital. Capital being an advantage, capital being a crutch. I don't think there's rules to this. I think that sometimes running out of capital can be an impetus to act. Sometimes having a cushion of capital can be like a feeling of taking risk. I think you have to tune in to your own tendencies and decide that for yourselves. But I would end by just saying, I think we need a world of more self-regulating adults. I think that society would benefit from that these days more than ever, perhaps. and self-awareness, being the ultimate competitive advantage for all of us, and sticking together long enough to figure it out and build great things. So I just want to thank everyone for coming out. Hope you all have a safe and wonderful Halloween. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right.